guys, it's M4J here and welcome back to Global Ventures here on Planet Coaster. Last time we built the bulk of the track work for the new Bandito Escape the West. This week and this episode we are going to finish I think all of the track work, and I think there's a POV somewhere involved as well. I will try and remember to untime-lapse the POV bit of the ride, just so you can actually see what it looks like. I was debating whether to do that or not this time out, because as you can still see, the building does clip the track quite a lot, and so does the rock work, and the tunnels don't have the right clearance yet. It's a little bit messy in that respect, but if enough people... I don't even know why I'm saying that. I'm not going to get direct feedback on this video. I might do a POV. There is one in the video still, so you can watch it sped up. Whether I slow it down or not so you guys can actually watch it or not, I don't know. I'm literally recording this audio like I've just woken up, so you could probably hear that in my voice, and you could probably tell that by the gobbledygook that I'm saying at the moment. So this is me just watching the train to make sure that the pacing of the ride is okay, and I don't mean pacing as in gaps between block breaks. I mean more just to make sure that the train doesn't enter the elements or the inversions at too high or lower speed. Everything looks fine, which is a good thing. I'm very happy with that. It sounds weird to say, but a majority of this ride I actually kind of got right first time, which is a very rare occurrence for me. So I'm really pleased that that happened. This is the back end of the ride. I think it will actually be referred to as the back end of the ride from now on, because it's easier to describe. It's just that the little bit of the coaster after you come out from the tunnel. So you drop down from the clock tower, you travel under the bank through the old abandoned mine shafts of gold light, and then you emerge on this side of the building. Now the point of this part of the ride, and actually last episode I was talking about covering up the back of the bank with hills, doing some terraforming, and that actually works quite well for the story of the ride, being that the story involves you dropping into the mine shaft, and it seems a bit weird that you would just end up back where you started. So to hide it almost and make it look like you're in another mountain range and you've actually escaped from the town, that would help with the immersion of the ride a lot better than just you dropping into the mine shaft and then ending back up where you started. As I say, it doesn't make much sense that you're escaping from the authorities, so you go back to the place that you robbed. So I think that does support the idea of terraforming a little bit more. Plus it makes the tunnels a little bit darker, and it should add some lighting effects to the dark ride element at the start of the ride as well. So this bit of the ride, as you can see, you come out of the Immelman, and there's like a corkscrew exit to that inversion, and then there's like a flying snake dive kind of inversion. Not in the Intamin sense of it's a heartline roll followed by a heartline dive loop kind of thing. More in the case of it's not really, I guess a wraparound corkscrew is what it is. I think that is actually the element I chose. But I always find the wraparound corkscrew there doesn't really tell the whole story. It's kind of like, I used the paperclip analogy last episode. It's kind of like you have a dive loop and then you take the bottom of it and you twist it slightly. That's what it feels more like. Here I'm just experimenting with station lengths, because I realised that if you take just one tile off the station, it goes from being a 4-car train down to a 2-car train, which I didn't want. Excuse me for yawning. Oh, that's what I mean by just woken up. The block breaks here going into the station was actually very easy to do, because everything was already lined up. I just had to build the sections. And this is a really good tip for coaster builders out there. One of the things that annoys me most when I watch other people's videos, and again I won't name names, I don't think that's particularly fair, but these people are very good at the theming aspect, the story aspect. They've got that nailed completely. It's absolutely brilliant, but they put brakes on curves, and particularly magnetic brakes. You can't build magnetic brakes on curves because the fin is about 30 centimeters long, on the bottom of a roller coaster train. Sometimes it's longer. And if you put that on a curve as tight as some people do in their videos, you would snap it in half. Simple as, because 30 centimeters as it goes around, it needs clearance on both sides, and magnetic brakes work by almost pinching the fin. There's no actual contact, but they're close enough that the magnetic field influences the fin. And that really annoys me. Friction brakes is the same. It's a physical block that the brakes clamp onto, and again, you can't do that on corners, because how are you meant to clamp onto something that's moving as it goes around the corner? You can't. It's a simple answer. So that annoys me. So the tip I have is build your brakes first. Build your block brakes, your trim brakes, your friction brakes, whatever it takes to slow your train down to whatever speed you want it to be, and then build backwards from that to connect up with the main bit of your track. You can use the autocomplete button, or you can try and find the little autocomplete symbol that appears sometimes when you're building track. It makes life so much easier. Sometimes you do end up with a little bit of a janky connection, that normally can be fixed through smoothing, but it's so much easier to do that than to try and build brake sections on curves or slopes, because the other one I've seen is a hill going up to the brakes, and someone's put brakes on the hill, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you why that's a bad idea. Most trim brakes on roller coasters are on the downslope for a reason. If you build it on the upslope and there's a malfunction, it will valley the train, and you don't want that, because specifically on big B&M inverts and hypers, that requires lifting the train off the track. And you know, most parks want to avoid that as much as possible, because that basically means your ride's closed down for anything up to a week whilst they sort that out. So that's one of my little building tips. I don't have many, to be honest. A lot of the tips I've picked up have been from other creators, trying to make my rides more immersive and more realistic. That's something that I would always do anyway, but watching other Planet Coaster creators has certainly helped with making that a reality. So it's all well and good that I sit there and think, I want to build a realistic theme park, but how do you actually then do that? One of the things I like about the Planet Coaster YouTube community is everyone is open to giving advice, and that is valuable. Sometimes people like to keep their cards quite close to their chest, but there's so many tutorial videos, tutorial series, even in normal videos, little tips and tricks that you can use to help your park. It's really, really good. So a huge thank you to all the other content creators who make Planet Coaster videos, who are willing to share their secrets, as it were. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the building of the ride. I did say, I think it was 2 episodes ago, there is an extra block section on the back end of the ride now. You can see where, as you came out of the wraparound inverted element, I don't really know what to call that one either. It's basically an overbank turn, but it does invert you. I think that is the 14th. Actually, no, that would be the 13th inversion of the ride now. Here's me just checking the gauge clearance on that Heartline roll, because you do get very, very close to the track above. I think the wheel sets, like, there's just enough space between those 2 tracks for one wheel set to pass through. And since there's only going to be one train in that block at any one time, I think I've gotten away with it. If necessary, I will lower the Heartline roll just a little bit more. But I think it's okay. I think it's okay. This was a heart in mouth moment for me, because I thought 2 trains had collided, or were sort of glitching into each other, and I realised that was one train with the back end of it on the curve. I was checking here to make sure that there was enough clearance, so that, like, you don't want one car to phase into the other. I think the design of the train is actually very, very good. It reflects the real life design of the Gerstlauer Infinity trains. The clearance was just about fine for my liking. It's a little bit tight, but not tight enough to have to rebuild the ride, I would say. So yeah, the back end of the ride. After that weird wraparound inversion overbank turn, currently it goes into like an airtime hill and then drops down into the brakes. But the pacing was off, and I've said pacing a lot in this block of videos. I wanted to make sure that you do not wait on the lift hill, partially because there's a bug in the game at the moment whereby if the train has to stop on the lift hill block. It doesn't stop at the top of the lift hill like you would expect. It actually stops halfway down the drop. I'm hoping they fix that in the time it's taken me to record this. But I definitely did not want a train stopping on that block because I don't know off the top of my head whether it would still have the same momentum when it starts again or whether it will end up valleying. I haven't tested it. As soon as it happened, I stopped and restarted the ride and tried to fix it. So after that weird wraparound inversion, it now rises up into an extra block break. And from that block break, it ends a bit like Saw the Ride from there, because it drops down into one more inversion, which is the cutback, and then does a banked left turn up into the brakes. And that bit was basically inspired, copied from Saw the Ride. As I said, the intro to this ride was copied from... Copied? I don't like the word copied. The intro to this ride was inspired by the Smiler. This is me testing the ride, doing the POV, so you can watch that while I talk. It's a bit of a lag going on there. I think because I was recording this on my laptop, which does struggle to run Planet Coaster at its highest settings. The hang time on that overbank turn I really like. It's the only time of the ride really where you properly slow down, not in a block section or on the lift hill. And it kind of adds that feeling of weightlessness and suspense to the ride, which I really like. So yeah, the intro to the ride was copied from the Smiler. I will say copied for the time being. And the outro to the ride was copied from Saw the Ride. And elements in between, the lift hill, dropping down a clock tower idea. Oh, this is where I stop on the block. Yeah, you can see what I mean now by the bug. The climbing up a tower after the launch, that was inspired by, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation I bet, Flut von Novgorod at Hansa Park, I think it is. I think it's at Hansa Park. Which I kind of, I've watched a lot of POVs of it, and I kind of thought of it as being like a mediocre Eurofighter. But it actually, unless the statistics are wrong, and I have seen someone question these statistics, it's one of the fastest launching coasters in Europe, if not the world, which I thought was interesting. And it almost sounds underrated in that respect. I think my problem with it was a Eurofighter that only has one inversion. I think it has one in the dark, actually, thinking about it. So maybe it has two inversions. But watching the POV, particularly the outdoor section after the launch, it has the Heartline roll, but I kept thinking like, oh, you could put a Cobra roll there, or you could put a Sea Serpent roll there, or something like that. For a launch of that speed, it kind of felt like wasted potential. But it does look like quite a fun little ride now that they've added the full theming to it, which is something else I didn't see in the original POVs. But yeah, the idea of climbing up a tower, Mystery Mine at Dollywood as well has that that element of climbing up inside a tower. This one, as you know, for Bandito, your only hope of escape is to dive into the old mine shaft. So as you climb the clock tower, you can hear the bell toll, and you know that it's now or never. This is me just watching the ride again, making sure that the pacing works. I do like that little slow entry into that dive loop as well. The overbank turn and that entry to the dive loop are probably two of the most suspenseful parts of the ride. And this is that weird element that I was talking about last episode, where it looks weird from the outside and it looks weird when you're on the ride. But when you actually compare it to real life elements, it does kind of match in terms of the shape and the speed and the style. And as long as it matches with real life examples, I'm not too bothered about its appearance. This is going through the mine shaft, coming out here, wrap around corkscrew. Again, I don't know whether this is just my preview that's lagging or whether the video is lagging for you guys as well. We enter the brakes far too quickly there, which is when I realised we had to build an extra block section or extend the ride. And the problem was I didn't want to extend the ride because that would extend the block section, which would then cause a train to have to wait on the lift hill. So this is where I started to look at, how do I build the ride a little bit longer, and what do I do about the pacing in the block section. And the solution, as I say, to add another block section, it makes this ride incredibly long. One of the problems with my coasters is they are very long. Each one, like Manic Miner is like a 3.5, 4 minute ride. Bandito is probably a 2.5, 3 minute ride. Raid of the Fort is also a really long ride. The only ones that aren't so far, Wildwood is pretty quick, and Antony and Cleopatra, the flawless invert dueling coasters, they're pretty quick as well. So it's just the ones over on this side of the park really that are quite long. I like story rides. I think that's my problem, is I like story rides. I like rides that have a beginning, a middle and an end. And with Bandito, you know, escaping into the hills, climbing the clock tower, escaping through the mines, and then finally crossing the border, you do end up with quite a long ride time. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I talk about realism a lot, and I don't think there's a park in Britain that could afford to build these rides, because they are quite long, well themed, immersive. There's a lot of terraforming and landscaping going on. I certainly don't think there's a park in the world that would build a tunnel as long as Bandito has, in order to have that drop into the mine shaft. But it doesn't mean I can't make my own sort of fictional version of the UK where that would happen. You never know, some oil-rich billionaire might come over one day and decide they want to build a theme park. No expenses spared. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, track layout for Bandito, besides that extra block section, is pretty much done. I did wonder at one point if the 0G roll, if the speed going into that was a little too fast, but I think the overbank turn kind of makes up for it. One of the things I read a lot on Reddit is people talking about the whippiness of 0G rolls on particular B&M inverts, and that is something you can't really get the whip as much on a sit-down coaster like this. What makes it whippy on a... I don't like that word, by the way, whippy. But what makes it a quick transition, what makes you whip round on an invert, is the fact that you're outside of the force zone. Which sounds a bit weird, but what I mean by that is, it's kind of like an airtime hill for me on an inverted coaster doesn't really work, because you're not being pulled out of your seat, you're being pushed towards the track. Whereas feeling the bottom of a drop on an invert, you feel heavier than you would on a sit-down coaster because you're being pulled away from the track. And it's all to do with where the track location is. If you're above the track, then you'll feel airtime. If you're below the track, then you'll feel like you're being pushed towards the ground or pulled towards the ground. So on a 0G roll, on a sit-down coaster, you feel more weightless because you're inside the circle. You're inside the sphere of influence, is probably a better way of saying it. Whereas on an invert, you're outside of that sphere, so you're being whipped across the top. A good way of showing it would be on a wing coaster, particularly ones that have the is it the wing over dive drop? I think they're called. So like the Swarm at Thorpe Park. If you sit on the right hand side, you're inside the inversion, so you don't really feel it as much, whereas if you're on the left hand side, you're on the outside. So instead of travelling downwards and then into the drop, you travel upwards and into the drop. I think that's my best way of explaining it, and I still haven't done a particularly good job. But you can see here I've built the extra block brake, and now trying to find a way to link it all together. Eventually you will see me settle on a design where you drop down into another tunnel that goes under the pathway there. This whole area now, Legend of the Frontier, there's 3 ways in, 3 ways out, and 2 of them are bookended by Bandito. So you got the one over by the launch, where the launch travels over it, and then the exit from the banana roll travels under the path. And then on this side, you have the drop into the cutback that travels under the path, and then you have the exit to the cutback also travels under the path. I think that's a pretty good thing. I like rides, particularly roller coasters, that interact with the path a lot. One of my favourite viewpoints at Chesington is if you enter the Transylvania area, as soon as you go onto the archway, if you turn right, the second lift hill of Vampire, when the train drops down and it swings up, and if you stand right up against the fence, it does feel like the train is going to collide with you. And it's a really nice viewpoint of the ride. It's a really well designed ride. Vampire, again, underrated is the word. It's not big and fast like the other Arrow suspended coasters around the world, but it fits perfectly with the park, and I think that's something that is lost in roller coaster designers these days. Again, it's a slightly opinionated section of the video here, but I don't like Cedar Point. I don't think there's anything particularly innovative about Cedar Point. Like in recent times, I should say, because in the past Magnum was the first coaster over 200 feet, Millennium Force was the first coaster over 300 feet, Maverick was the first Intamin Blitz coaster, but since then it's kind of been like a copy-paste enlarged job. So they look at all the other parks around the world and they see what they've got and they see what records they hold, and then they copy and paste the design to their park, change a couple of elements to break some records, and then that's their ride. So, you know, Steel Vengeance has the world record for the most amount of airtime on any roller coaster in the world, but what does that actually mean? I don't know. I'm not into that kind of thing. I think it's non-immersive. It doesn't fit with any sort of identity other than just trying to be the biggest or the fastest. And the problem with being the biggest or the fastest is someone's always going to beat you eventually. And then what identity does your ride have once the record is lost? I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me. So I like my parks, all the parks that I visit. As I said last episode, I'm very fortunate that I live in the UK, where pretty much every theme park, they put as much effort into theming the ride as they do into building it. But that is it for this episode, guys. Sorry to end on a bit of a negative note there, but hey ho. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course if you're enjoying the series, drop some comments down below on Reddit with ideas, feedback, all that kind of good stuff. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Jumping ahead of myself there. If you have already subscribed to my channel, thank you guys for your continued support. And until next time, where we will be doing the theming to Bandito, I will see you soon.